That night, at the North Lake Club Gala, my stepmother slapped me so hard I tasted blood. I had refused to play poor for a photo. The room chuckled. Then my grandfather, the family's quiet billionaire, raised his hand. Tonight, we listened to her. 30 minutes later, a video played on the LED screen, one even I had not seen. The hand that hit me began to shake, facing a different kind of justice. My name is Arabella Hoffman. I am 29 years old, and my life is a quiet study in perceived failure. I am an academic writing lecturer at Redwood Vale Community College, a cluster of concrete buildings nestled in the less photogenic part of Granite City. My income is, by my family's standards, a rounding error. It is just enough. It pays for my one-bedroom apartment, a space filled with more books than furniture. It keeps my aging hatchback running, the one with the persistent rattle in the passenger door. It allows me to live a life I find meaningful, but it is a life my family refuses to see. To them. I am the scholarship kid who went to a good school and came back a disappointment, a daughter who chose obscurity over ambition. My father remarried 5 years after my mother died. He married Lydia Mercer. Lydia is a woman who does not simply exist. She curates. Her entire life is a performance piece. She is addicted to the optics of success, a zealot whose religion is class, but her definition of class has nothing to do with character. It is about labels, zip codes, and the correct, dismissive tone to use with waitstaff. She entered our lives not as a partner, but as a brand manager, turning family dinners into stakeholder meetings where the only agenda was projecting success. My father, caught in a spiral of get-rich-quick projects and terrified of being seen as anything less than affluent, adapted quickly. Emotional connection was replaced with mutual achievement. In this meticulously curated world, I am a permanent blemish. What they do not know, what they have never bothered to ask, is what I do after my last class ends at Redwood Vale. They do not know that I am the co-founder of the Bridge Light Initiative. It is a nonprofit I started with 2 other educators, a grassroots organization dedicated to providing literacy and writing support to underserved high school students. It was born in my kitchen, fueled by stale coffee and a shared frustration with the gaps in the system. We run on a shoestring budget, using recycled textbooks and donated, ancient laptops. For the first 2 years, I did not take a single dollar in salary. Every cent went back into the workshops, into the software, into the late-night pizza for our volunteers. My family has no concept of this. They see my schedule, my lack of designer clothes, my refusal to engage in the status games, and they see failure. Lydia, in particular, finds my career a source of secondhand embarrassment. It is so quaint, Arabella, she often says at family gatherings, her voice dripping with false pity. All that time teaching people who will just end up, well, you know, it is a poor career. Darling, noble, but poor. My father just nods, his silence a familiar, heavy blanket. Lydia has a point. Bella, he might murmur later. It is all about perception. Then came the big news, the annual Horizon Regent Foundation Gala. This was not just any party. This was the social event of the season in Granite City. It was Lydia's Super Bowl, and this year, it held special significance. My maternal grandfather, Ethan Whitmore, was being honored as the foundation's primary patron. My grandfather is a man of quiet, immense wealth, the kind that does not need to announce itself. He is the antithesis of Lydia. While she collects acquaintances, he builds institutions. We are not close. He was always a distant, formidable figure. But he is family. Lydia was incandescent with excitement. The gala was her stage, and my grandfather's involvement gave her a starring role by association. 2 weeks before the event, she called me. Arabella, darling, she cooed, a tone that always set my teeth on edge. You simply must attend the Horizon Gala. It is for your grandfather. After all, it would be rude not to show support. I knew this was not an invitation. It was a summons. All right, Lydia, I can go. Wonderful. The manufactured enthusiasm was palpable. Now, about your situation. We need to frame this correctly. When people ask what you do, and they will ask, we cannot have you confusing them with that little community college nonsense. I gripped the phone. What are you suggesting, Lydia? I have prepared a perfectly acceptable script for you, she said, as if offering me a gift. You will simply say you are temporarily unemployed and exploring new ventures. It is vague, it is sophisticated, and it stops any further questions. It saves us the embarrassment. The air in my small apartment felt thin. Lydia, I am not unemployed. I am a lecturer. I am not going to lie about my profession. Her voice turned to ice. Arabella, do not be difficult. This is not about you. This is about your father. This is about me. We are trying to build something here. And your stubbornness is not helpful. Do not ruin this night. Do not embarrass your family. I will attend, I said, my own voice flat and steady. I will be polite, but I will not lie. The line went dead. The night of the gala. The North Lake Club was dripping with chandeliers and the low, confident hum of old money. I wore the only suitable dress I owned, a simple, dark blue silk that I had bought at a consignment shop 3 years ago. I felt like a sparrow in a room full of peacocks. Lydia was holding court near the grand staircase, resplendent in a gown that probably cost more than my annual salary. She was flanked by her friends, a trio of women with identical, surgically tightened expressions and glittering jewels. I took a deep breath and walked over to pay my respects. Lydia, Father, you both look wonderful. My father gave me a tight, anxious nod. Lydia turned, her smile never reaching her eyes. Arabella, you came. She cast a dismissive glance over my dress. How simple. One of her friends, a woman with diamonds weighing her earlobes, leaned in. Lydia, darling, you never told us your stepdaughter was, well, her eyes raked over me. Oh, this is Arabella, Lydia said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, loud enough for everyone in her circle to hear. She is the academic, so devoted to her little school, teaching. Well, goodness knows what. It is a charity case, really. Lydia, I said, my voice low but firm. Please do not do this. Do what, darling? She asked, her eyes wide with false innocence. It is so hard for her. She continued to her friends, ignoring me. She just refuses to accept her potential. We have offered her everything, but she insists on this poverty. It is practically a performance. The women chuckled, a sound like ice cubes clinking in an empty glass. I am not performing, I said, the heat rising in my face. I am a lecturer at Redwood Vale. It is an honorable profession, and I am not ashamed of it. I will not be spoken about as if I am a child. Lydia's smile vanished. The mask of the perfect hostess cracked. You, she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper, you will not embarrass me. You will stick to the script. You are unemployed. I am not unemployed, I said, standing taller, and I will not lie for you. It happened faster than I could process. Her rage, so tightly controlled, exploded, her hand, heavy with rings, arced through the air. The sound was a sharp, ugly crack that cut through the ballroom's gentle hum. My head snapped to the side. A searing, electric pain blossomed on my cheek. The room went utterly silent. I could feel every eye in the grand hall lock onto me. I tasted the sharp, metallic tang of blood on my tongue. My lip was split. Lydia stood there, breathing hard, her hands still raised slightly. Her expression was not one of remorse. It was one of cold, righteous fury. She had been disobeyed, and this was the consequence. A few nervous titters broke the silence. Laughter. They thought it was part of some bizarre family drama, a spectacle. I felt a wave of humiliation so profound it threatened to buckle my knees. The urge to flee, to run out of that opulent room and never look back, was overwhelming. I put my fingers to my lip and looked at the smear of red. And then, from across the room, a new voice cut through the whispers, a voice that held an authority no one in that room dared to question. Everyone, silence. It was my grandfather, Ethan Whitmore. He was standing, his gaze fixed not on Lydia, but on me. The entire room, hundreds of people, froze. The laughter died. The whispers vanished. "We will listen to Arabella." His words hung in the absolute stillness. It was not a suggestion, it was a command. Lydia's hand, the one that had just struck me, slowly lowered. Her face, moments ago flushed with rage, went pale. My father looked like a ghost, his eyes wide, flickering between his wife and my grandfather. I swallowed the blood in my mouth. The sting on my cheek was a fire, but the shame was worse. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to cover my face and run. But I looked at my grandfather. His eyes were not pitying. They were waiting. I straightened my spine. I took my hand away from my mouth, and I stayed. The silence in the North Lake Club was an absolute thing. It was a vacuum, sucking away the polite chatter, the clinking of glasses, and the soft strains of the string quartet. The air itself felt thin, pressurized. The sting on my cheek had bloomed into a hot, throbbing ache, a localized fire. I could taste the salt and copper of my own blood where my tooth had cut the inside of my lip. I stood there, under the glare of the crystal chandeliers, and in that awful, stretched-out moment of silence, the last 15 years of my life condensed and played back, a high-speed silent film. My mother died when I was 7. She was quiet, and she loved words. My most vivid memories of her are not of her face, but of her hands, the fingers smudged with ink from the fountain pen she used to write poetry on yellow legal pads. She left me a legacy of books, stacks of them, lining the walls of my childhood bedroom. When she was gone, the house lost its softness. I grew up inside those books, hiding in narratives written by other people, because my own was too quiet, too empty. I filled endless notebooks and scraps of paper with my own words, trying to build a shelter. My father, left adrift, clung to the only thing he knew, the pursuit of success. He is not a cruel man. He is an anxious one, terrified of obscurity. He began to chase get-rich-quick schemes, speculative real estate, and ground-floor opportunities that never seemed to get off the ground. Our home life became a reflection of his balance sheet. Affection was replaced with achievement. "How are you feeling?" became, "What did you accomplish?" My grades were not a measure of learning. They were a status report, a line item on his portfolio of success. Then came Lydia. Lydia Mercer did not enter our home as a step-parent. She entered as a brand manager. She saw my father's ambition and my grandfather's distant, looming wealth, and she took over the account. Our house was redecorated, our social lives curated. Every dinner became a performance, every vacation a photo opportunity. Lydia lives by a simple, brutal creed. Image is reality. Class, to her, is not about character. It is about the visible, audible, and exclusive markers of wealth. I was her first, and most persistent, branding problem. I was the quiet, bookish daughter of the first wife. I did not fit the aesthetic. When it came time for college, the expectation was clear. I would major in finance, or perhaps pre-law. I would pursue a career that was, in Lydia's words, presentable. I chose education. I will never forget the dinner I told them. My father stared at his plate. Lydia, after a long, assessing pause, let out a brittle laugh. "Education, Arabella," she said, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. "Darling, that is a hobby for women who marry rich. It is not a career. It is the poor path." The poor path. The label stuck. I took it. I got my master's and returned to Granite City, not to the manicured lawns of the suburbs where Lydia held court, but to the concrete campus of Redwood Vale Community College. They never asked what I did there. They never asked about my students, about my work. To them, I was just the teacher, a mild embarrassment, a daughter who had willfully chosen obscurity. Lydia, in particular, used my career as a social prop for her own perceived magnanimity. "It is so dull," she would sigh to her friends over brunch, loud enough for me to hear. "She is just devoted to that little school. Of course, the pay is, well, it is practically charity. We are just so proud she has a hobby." The hobby she dismissed was the Bridgelight Initiative. Bridgelight was born in my small apartment kitchen 3 years ago. It started with me, another adjunct named Maria, and a retired librarian, fueled by stale coffee and a shared sense of rage. We saw students, smart, capable, hardworking adults, who were functionally illiterate, pass through a system that had failed them. We started with nothing. Our first office was a corner booth at a 24-hour diner. We salvaged 10 old laptops from a business that was upgrading. We bought recycled textbooks by the pound. Our first volunteers were former students. For the first 2 years, I did not take a single dollar in salary. Every cent I earned from Redwood Vale that did not go to my own rent and food. I funneled into Bridgelight. We bought software licenses. We paid for bus passes so our students could get to class. We kept the lights on in the church basement we rented for $12 an hour. That was my secret. That was the poor path. And my father, he stood by. He watched Lydia mock me at holidays, watched her dismiss my life's work as a quaint little project. He said nothing. His silence was a constant, heavy presence. He wanted peace. He wanted to keep Lydia, with her social connections and her iron-willed management of his image, happy. And the price of that peace was my dignity. I was the acceptable sacrifice. The only person who ever acknowledged my path was the man now standing across the ballroom, my grandfather, Ethan Whitmore. He was a distant figure, more concept than relative. He was my mother's father, and I think her death created a chasm he never knew how to cross. But he never forgot me. 4 times a year, a simple, thick card made of heavy cream-colored stock would arrive in my mailbox. No birthday wishes, no holiday greetings, just his signature. E. Beneath 2 words written in a strong, dark fountain pen. Hold fast. Hold fast. Stay the course. Do not let go. I had been holding fast for a decade. I had learned to be resilient in silence. I had built my life, my real life, in the shadows, letting the insults and the dismissals of Lydia and the complicit silence of my father roll off me. I thought that was strength. But standing there, the metallic taste of blood filling my mouth, I realized my silent endurance had been misinterpreted. It was not seen as strength. It was seen as weakness, as permission. The pain on my cheek was nothing. It was a physical sensation, already fading. The real, excruciating pain was the public confirmation of what I had known for years. In my own family, I was invisible. I was so utterly unimportant, so far beneath consideration, that my stepmother felt perfectly entitled to strike me in a room full of her peers, as if disciplining a dog that had misbehaved on the carpet. The titters from the crowd confirmed it. I was not a person. I was an embarrassment, a piece of social friction to be violently smoothed over. And in that moment, something inside me broke, or perhaps something was finally forged. My grandfather's voice, "We will listen to Arabella," was a command, but it was also an invitation. The old Arabella, the one who had survived by hiding, would have mumbled an apology and fled the room, burying the humiliation. But I was not that person anymore. The woman who built Bridgelight from nothing, the woman who taught students how to find their own voices, was not going to run. I tasted my blood one more time. I swallowed. I met my grandfather's gaze across the silenced room. I made a vow to myself right there, a promise that burned hotter than the sting on my face. I would not retreat. I would not be erased. I would either reclaim my voice, my name, and my work, right here, tonight, or I would leave this family and their poisoned world forever. My grandfather's words, "We will listen to Arabella," hung in the air, a command that had sucked all the oxygen from the room. I stood frozen, a living statue of humiliation. my cheek a constellation of pain, the taste of my own blood sharp on my tongue. Every person in that ballroom was staring, their expressions a mix of pity, morbid curiosity, and the polite, detached horror of the wealthy witnessing a breach in decorum. My father's face was ashen. Lydia, for the first time, looked uncertain. The hand she had struck me with was now pressed to her chest, as if in shock at her own vulgarity. But the uncertainty only lasted a moment. I saw her eyes narrow, calculating. I wanted to speak, but what could I say? My stepmother just hit me? I am not unemployed? Every word felt small and useless. My body was screaming at me to run, to bolt through the grand doors and disappear back into the anonymity of my life, the one they all disdained. I was gathering the will to take that first, shameful step, to turn my back, when a small vibration came from the simple clutch I was holding. It was my phone, a text message. It was a stupid, mundane interruption to the grand, awful drama I was trapped in. I had no intention of looking, but it buzzed again, a persistent, urgent pulse against my palm. My grandfather was still standing, his gaze a physical weight holding me in place. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the air circulation. Slowly, keeping my head high, I let my hand slip into the clutch. I did not pull the phone out. I just angled the bright screen toward my body, a tiny private light in the suffocating public glare. One new message. Do not leave. 10 minutes. Watch the screen. E. My breath caught. E.W. Ethan Whitmore, my grandfather. It was not a request. It was an echo of his old command. Hold fast. I lowered my hand, my fingers gripping the small bag so tightly my knuckles went white. My heart, which had been a frantic bird against my ribs, gave one huge, painful thud and then settled into a heavy, rhythmic beat. I was not being rescued. I was being deployed. The silence stretched, becoming unbearable. It had been, perhaps, only 30 seconds since my grandfather had spoken, but it felt like an hour. It was Lydia who finally broke it, attempting to reclaim control. She let out a short, brittle laugh, waving a dismissive hand. Oh, Ethan, you are so dramatic. She's just overwrought. A little family disagreement. That is all. She gets emotional. She turned her painted smile back to her friends, expecting the world to realign itself around her. But no one smiled back. The power had shifted, and it had not moved to her. Before my grandfather could respond, a man in a black suit with a headset hurried onto the small stage where the string quartet had been playing. He tapped the microphone, and the electronic chirp was a violent sound in the tomb-like quiet. Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the interruption, the man said, his voice amplified, nervous. We will be taking a brief, 10-minute pause in the evening's program. A request from our patron, Mr. Whitmore. A request from our patron, the words echoed. A new wave of whispers erupted, louder this time. The technician retreated, leaving the stage empty. The house lights, which had been dimmed for atmosphere, brightened slightly, returning the room to a harsh, objective clarity. Lydia's composure returned, flooding her face with a triumphant, vindictive confidence. She visibly relaxed, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips. Of course, she had misinterpreted the entire event. In her world, my grandfather, the patriarch, the patron, was stepping in not to defend me, but to discipline me. He was pausing the party to handle the family disagreement she had started. I was the poor relative who had misbehaved, and he was about to put me in my place to save his family the embarrassment. She glided the few steps to my father, linking her arm through his. See, she murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. It is all being handled. My father looked ill. He was sweating, his eyes darting between me and my grandfather, who had remained standing, watching, saying nothing. My father did not see a moral issue. He saw a financial one. He saw his connection to the Whitmore fortune, his wife's social standing, his own precarious projects, all hanging in the balance. He shuffled toward me, his face a mask of pleading, anxious anger. "Arabella," he hissed, his voice a low, desperate rasp. "What did you do?" "Just apologize to her. Apologize to everyone. Do not ruin this. Do not ruin this for the family. This is a huge night for us. Do not ruin this." The slap, the blood, my career, my life. None of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was the opportunity, the optics. "I have nothing to apologize for," I said. My voice was quiet, but it did not shake. The text message was a secret shield. I was no longer a victim. I was a witness, waiting for the same thing everyone else was. "You stubborn," he started, but he was cut off. "She will not be apologizing." "Robert," my grandfather's voice. He had not moved, but his words cut across the room. My father flinched and stepped back, his brief flare of anger extinguished, leaving only that damp, nervous fear. The guests were now fully engaged. This was better than the silent auction. They had broken into small, murmuring groups. I could hear the whispers, the snippets of conversation. "Hit her. Right in the face. Can you imagine? That is the teacher, isn't it? The one Lydia always complains about. She is causing a dreadful scene. So inappropriate. But Ethan Whitmore, he is the one who stopped it. He is on her side? No. He is protecting the family name. He is furious. She is done." I stood alone in the center of that whispering storm. My cheek was a purple-red mark. I could feel it without seeing. I did not look at Lydia, who was now sipping champagne, the picture of smug victory. I did not look at my father, who was wiping his brow with a handkerchief. I looked at the large, blank LED screen that hung above the stage. The 10 minutes passed like a lifetime. Then, the main lights in the ballroom began to dim, not just to atmosphere, but down, 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 until the only illumination came from the emergency exit signs and the small candles on the tables. A hush fell, this time one of pure theatrical anticipation. My grandfather moved. He walked to the stage, not onto it, but to the microphone stand the technician had used. A single, focused spotlight found him, illuminating him from the waist up. He was not a showman, but he had an absolute, unshakable presence. "Good evening," he said. His voice was calm, conversational, yet it filled the entire vast space. "Thank you for your patience. Tonight's event for the Horizon Regent Foundation is about many things. It is about charity. It is about community." He paused, and his eyes found me in the darkness. "But in my experience, charity and community are not built on galas. They are not built on expensive dresses or the names on a program. They are built on value, real value, not stock value, not property value, human value, the kind that is often quiet, the kind that is often overlooked." Lydia, bathed in the candlelight of her table, still had that cold, satisfied smile. She thought this was for her. She thought this was the preamble to his corporate donation, a speech about the values their family fund supported. "Tonight," my grandfather continued, "I wanted to take a moment to change the program, to use this platform not to celebrate what we have, but to celebrate what we do, to celebrate real, measurable, human value." He stepped back from the microphone. "Please, your full attention to the screen." The spotlight on him died. The room plunged into absolute darkness, so dark I felt a moment of disorientation. I could hear someone cough. I heard Lydia's impatient huff. And then the massive LED screen lit up. It was not a corporate logo. It was not a video of a new hospital wing. It was a simple, clean, blue and white graphic, a stylized drawing of an open book, its pages turning into a bridge, and beneath it, the words, "The Bridge Light Initiative." I stopped breathing. This was impossible. This was my world, my secret, my poor path, my charity case. What was it doing here? A sound rippled through the ballroom. It was not a whisper. It was a collective, audible gasp, a sharp, unified intake of breath from hundreds of people. I looked at Lydia. Her smile was frozen, grotesque, her champagne flute halfway to her mouth. She did not understand. She was searching her memory, trying to place the name. My father was squinting, confused. "What is that?" he whispered. But I could not answer. I was staring at the screen, my own shock as profound as anyone's in the room. This was not my doing. This was my grandfather's. He had seen me. He had been watching, all this time, while I thought I was invisible. The logo faded, and the screen went black. No one moved. No one spoke. The tension in the room was a tangible thing. A high-voltage wire pulled taut. The gala, the slap, the drama. It had all been a preamble. And no one, not me, not Lydia, not my father, knew what was about to play next. The black screen hung in the silence, a void. I felt my heart hammering against my ribs. A trapped bird, my name, my project. In this place, it was a violation. My secret work, the only part of my life that was truly mine, was being dragged into Lydia's world. I felt a surge of blind panic. This was not my grandfather rescuing me. This was him exposing me. The screen flickered. The image that appeared was not glossy. It was grainy, shot under the harsh, humming fluorescent lights of a cinder-block classroom. It was not a studio. It was the Northbridge Community Center basement. The camera focused on a man in his 40s, his hands stained with grease, his brow furrowed in concentration. I knew him. His name was Darnell. He was a night shift mechanic, and he was trying to read a children's book. His finger, thick and scarred, traced the words. "The house." He stumbled, his face tight with frustration. A quiet voice, off camera, encouraged him. It was Maria, my co-founder. "You know this one. Darnell, just sound it out." "The house is on the hill." He stopped. He looked up, his eyes wide. He looked straight into the camera, though I knew he was looking at Maria. "The house is on the hill." He said it again, not as a question, but as a statement, as a fact he had uncovered himself. I read it. His face, a map of hard-luck lines, suddenly crumpled. He put his head down on the simple folding table, and his broad shoulders began to shake. He was weeping, not in shame, but in a profound, earth-shaking relief. The scene faded to black. White, simple text appeared on the screen, stark and silent. "Students served to date, 12,400. My breath hitched. Where did he get this? This was our internal dashboard. This was the data I tracked on my ancient laptop, the data I presented to no one but my tiny team of volunteers. More text appeared. Measurable literacy improvement via the Bridgelight metric, 91%. A new image faded in. It was a scan of a piece of yellow notebook paper, the kind with the blue and red lines. The handwriting was large and shaky. A woman's voice, warm and clear, began to read it. "Dear Bridgelight, I work the night shift at the hospital. My daughter, Sophia, is in the 3rd grade, and she could not read. The school said she was behind. She said she was stupid. I took her to your Saturday class for 8 weeks. Last night, I came home at 6 a.m., and she had left a note for me on the kitchen counter. It said, 'I love you, Mom.' She spelled love right. Thank you. Thank you for giving my daughter her words." The screen changed again. It was a different classroom. Maria was talking to an unseen interviewer. "We run the teacher trainings on Saturdays," she said, her expression serious and passionate. "We show them how to use our methods, how to spot the students who fall through the cracks. They are all volunteers. We are all volunteers." The screen cut to black, a long, agonizing pause. And then, the words that sucked the air from my lungs. Co-founder and executive director, Arabella Hoffman. A sound ripped through the ballroom. It was not a whisper. It was a physical, audible shockwave, a collective gasp from hundreds of people at once. I could see Lydia in the dim glow from the stage. Her face was not pale. It was the color of chalk. The champagne flute she was holding tilted, and a stream of gold liquid spilled over her knuckles and onto her couture gown. She did not notice. Her eyes were wide, staring at my name. My father's mouth was open. He was looking at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. He looked like a man who had just been told the sky was blue, but had believed it was green his entire life. He looked, for the first time, utterly lost. The video was not finished. The screen lit up again. This time, the footage was clearly from a security camera. Grainy, with a timestamp in the corner dated 2 years prior. It was me. It was me at 10 o'clock at night, in my worn-out jeans and my old redwood veil sweatshirt, my hair pulled back in a messy knot. I was hauling a heavy cardboard crate of donated textbooks down the narrow stairs to the church basement. I looked exhausted. Cut, me, on a rickety stepladder, running network cable along a ceiling beam. Cut, me, in the back of my hatchback, unloading a dozen beige, obsolete computer towers. Cut, me, asleep at my tiny kitchen table, my head resting on a stack of spreadsheets, the clock on the wall reading 3:14 a.m. White text appeared over the footage, simple and brutal. Years 1 and 2, 0% administrative salary. The footage of me faded, replaced by a rapid-fire sequence of official-looking documents. Logos flashed across the screen. The Granite City Unified School District, the Redwood Vale Partnership Program, the Northbridge Community Trust. Each one was a certification of partnership, a recognition of Bridgelight's work. Each one was clearly dated, 1 year ago, 18 months ago, 2 years ago. This was not a new hobby. This was not a quaint little project. This was an established, recognized, multi-year operation. And then, my grandfather's voice filled the room. It was not amplified, but it was deep, calm, and carried an absolute authority that silenced every rustle, every cough. Value, he said, his voice layered over the final image of a district commendation, does not demand a stage, but sometimes it needs a light. The screen changed one last time. It was a close-up. It was my hand, resting on a worksheet, guiding a student's. The nails were short, unpolished. There was ink smudged on the side of my index finger and a dry, cracked paper cut on my knuckle from a ream of copy paper. The camera held on it, this unglamorous, working hand. Then, the image slowly dissolved, cross-fading into the face of Darnell. The mechanic from the first scene. He was not crying anymore. He was smiling, his teeth showing, holding up the children's book. The screen went black. The darkness was total. For a full 3 seconds, no one moved, no one breathed. Then, slowly, the house lights began to rise. Not the harsh, bright glare from before, but a soft, warm glow that gradually filled the room, illuminating every face. I was still standing in the same spot, next to Lydia's table. My cheek was a blazing, purple-red mark. My lip was split. My dress was simple, but I was no longer the center of a humiliating spectacle. I was the center of everything. Every eye in that room was fixed on me, but the axis of the world had tilted. The pity was gone. The morbid curiosity was gone. The polite disdain was gone. The gazes that met mine were filled with a stunning, profound, and absolute reassessment. I turned my head. Lydia's friends, the women who had tittered and smirked, were staring at her. Their expressions were appalled, confused. They looked at her, the abuser, then back at me, the charity case. Lydia herself was a statue carved from ice. Her mask of social grace had not just slipped, it had been publicly, violently shattered, and the pieces were at her feet. I stood there, under the full, bright lights of the North Lake Club, surrounded by the wealthiest and most powerful people in the city, and for the first time in my life, I was entirely and completely seen. The light in the ballroom was bright, warm, and absolute. It was no longer the flattering, dim-lit glow of a gala. It was the light of an interrogation room, and I was at the center of it, the mark on my cheek of violent, visible truth. The silence that held the room was no longer the stunned hush of a spectacle. It was a silence of profound, collective reassessment. It was the sound of 150 powerful people recalibrating reality. My grandfather was still standing near the stage. He had not moved, had not shifted his gaze. He looked at me, past the shock, past the injury, and saw the co-founder on the screen. He nodded to the technician, who, understanding a cue no one else had heard, reappeared and moved the microphone stand to the center of the small stage. Then, my grandfather looked back at me. His voice was quiet, carrying no amplification, but it sliced through the stillness. "Arabella, the presentation seems incomplete. I believe you will say the rest." It was not a question. It was a coronation. He was not saving me from the humiliation. He was handing me the power I had just earned. My legs felt like they were moving through wet cement. My entire body was a ringing, adrenaline-fueled alarm. Go up there? With a split lip and a bruised cheek, in my consignment dress? Go up there and what? I thought of Darnell, his shoulders shaking as he wept over a children's book. I thought of the 3 a.m. spreadsheets. I thought of my grandfather's cards. Hold fast. I took one step, then another. I did not look at Lydia. I did not look at my father. I walked past the silent, staring tables, past the bank presidents, the surgeons, the old money heirs. I could feel their eyes on me, on my face, on my simple dress. The only sound in the entire grand ballroom was the click of my second-hand heels on the polished parquet floor. I reached the stage. I stepped up. The microphone was set for a man's height. My hands were shaking, but I reached out and adjusted the metal arm, lowering it to my level. The small screech of metal against metal was deafening. I looked out at the sea of faces, a blur of jewels and tuxedos. I swallowed, tasting blood again. "My name," I said, and my voice was a reedy, unfamiliar rasp. I stopped. I took a deep, shuddering breath. I rooted my feet to the floor, and I started again, this time with the voice I used in my classroom, the voice that commanded attention. "My name is Arabella Hoffman. What you just saw is the Bridgelight Initiative." I anchored myself to the work. The work was real. The slap was just a vulgar interruption. "Bridgelight was founded 3 years ago," I said, my voice gaining strength with every word. "It was founded on a simple premise, that potential is universal, but opportunity is not. We believe literacy is a fundamental human right, not a luxury, but we also believe that charity without accountability is just noise." I saw a few people in the front rows nod. They understood that. Accountability, results. So we built a model. Our mission is to maximize overlooked resources. We take the hardware that corporations call obsolete, and we turn it into learning stations. We take the outdated textbooks, and we turn them into new skills. We take the empty hours in a church basement, a library, a community center, and we turn those empty hours into futures. I was in my element now. This was my lecture. "And we measure everything," I said, my voice sharp. "We do not measure good intentions. We measure results. We track every single student hour. We track comprehension gains, which, as you saw, are currently at 91%. We are not a hobby. We are a lean, data-driven, nonprofit educational program. And we do all of this, currently, on an annual operating budget of just over $40,000. A low, vibrating murmur moved through the crowd. To them, $40,000 was a bar tab. "It is a lie." The shout was so shrill, so sudden, it made me flinch. It was Lydia. She was on her feet. Her face, which had been chalk white, was now a mottled, furious red. The champagne she had spilled had left a large, dark stain on the front of her designer gown, but she was beyond caring. The mask of the perfect hostess was gone, burned away. This was the raw, snarling creature beneath. She is making it all up. This whole thing, she shrieked, pointing at me, her finger trembling. This is a performance. She is doing this to embarrass me, to get sympathy from all of you. She was always jealous, always trying to undermine me. The room was electrified, the tension snapping. This was the second act they had been waiting for. She was hit, a woman at a table near the front said, her voice clear and appalled. She deserved it, Lydia screeched. The room gasped as one. She had said it. She had said the quiet part, the ugly, indefensible part, out loud. She is a liar! Lydia was frantic now, realizing her mistake, trying to claw her way back. Lying about her work, her data. It is all fake. She is nobody. She is just a community college teacher. The final insult, That is a very serious accusation, Lydia. My grandfather's voice, he had not moved. He sounded calm, almost academic, like a surgeon preparing for an incision. You are claiming, he continued, that this entire presentation, the footage, the testimonials, the certified school district partnerships, is a fabrication, created tonight, by me, to garner sympathy for my granddaughter. Yes, Lydia said, seizing the lifeline she thought he was offering. Yes, you did this. You did this for her, to make me look bad. You are partially correct, Ethan said, his voice dangerously smooth. I did authorize the production of that video, but I did not create the content. Arabella did, with her work, over the last 3 years. He turned his gaze from Lydia and looked toward the back of the room, where the technicians were. A fabrication should be easy to disprove. Lydia, in fact, it should only take, shall we say, 5 minutes? Lydia's furious expression faltered. A flicker of confusion, of true fear, entered her eyes. What? Let us verify it, my grandfather announced to the room. Let us all, right here, right now, verify this lie. John, he called to the technician. The QR code, please. The giant LED screen above my head, which had been displaying the Bridgelight logo, went black. A second later, it was replaced by a single, massive, black and white QR code. Please, my grandfather's voice boomed, now amplified by the main system. Take out your phones, all of you, scan this code. It will take you to the live, public-facing dashboard of the Bridgelight Initiative. It is the same one our partners at the Granite City School District use. Please, check the data, check the timelines, check the linked press releases. He paused, letting the instructions sink in. I will wait. The room did not erupt in applause. It erupted in activity. It was the sound of 100 designer clutches clicking open, the sound of 100 high-end smartphones being unlocked. People were standing up, leaning into the aisles, aiming their phones at the glowing screen. Lydia was frozen. She was staring at the code as if it were an assassin. And then the whispers began. They were not titters. They were not gossip. They were the sounds of discovery. My God. I heard a man, the CEO of a major local bank, murmur, "It is real. The dashboard is live. The metrics." Look at this, a woman next to him said, holding her phone out. It's not just data. Click on gallery. That is the man from the video. Darnell, the photo is timestamped, 6 months ago. Wait, there is a press link, another voice said from a nearby table. There, an article from the Granite City Gazette. Local initiative tackles literacy gap. It is from last year, and there she is. There is her picture. A man I did not know looked up from his phone, his face a mask of dawning comprehension. He looked at me, standing on the stage, then he looked at Lydia, and his expression turned to one of slow, cold, unadulterated contempt. Stop this! Stop it now! It was my father. He was lurching from the table, his face slick with sweat, his tuxedo jacket pulling tight across his shoulders. He was not looking at me. He was staring at my grandfather, his face a mask of panic. This is a family matter. Ethan, he yelled. This is about pride. This is not for them. He waved his hand frantically at the room full of people scrolling through my life's work. "You are embarrassing the family, making a spectacle. This is not a boardroom. This is a gala. What are you doing?" He was pleading for the old rules, the rules of silence, of appearances, of burying the truth to protect the brand. My grandfather turned, very slowly, to face him. "Pride, Robert?" Ethan's voice was soft, but the microphone made it a weapon. "You want to speak about pride?" He gestured to me, to my face, to the red mark that was now surely turning a deep, ugly purple. "Tell me, Robert," he said, his voice a quiet, lethal inquiry. "What kind of pride allows a man to stand by, silent, while his wife strikes his daughter in the middle of a public ballroom?" My father physically recoiled. He stopped, his mouth open, as if he had been the one struck. He had no answer. The question, the truth of it, had just annihilated him. He staggered, looking for his chair, but finding nothing. The room was dead silent. The moral weight of that question hung in the air, crushing all the fine china and crystal beneath it. My grandfather did not let him recover. He turned his gaze to Lydia. "Lydia," he said, "you claimed you were embarrassed. Is that your defense? That you were embarrassed by my granddaughter?" Lydia, seeing my father's public execution, scrambled for a defense. She provoked me. She was ruining the evening. She was talking about her poor job, in front of everyone. It was humiliating. It was the confession, the final, damning piece of evidence. "I see," my grandfather said, and the coldness in his voice made the air feel thin. "So, humiliation, a woman who runs that," he gestured to the QR code, which was still glowing like a beacon, "humiliated you, simply by existing, by telling the truth." Lydia's argument, her entire life's philosophy, collapsed in on itself. Her why was not a defense. It was a motive, and a pathetic one. She knew it. She looked to her friends, the women who had laughed with her an hour before. They were not looking at her. They were all intently, fascinatingly, studying their phones, scrolling through my work. They were actively, pointedly, looking away from her. She was toxic. She was a pariah. The silence of the verdict settled. I was still on the stage. My heart was a drum, my cheek afire. But I looked at Lydia, and for the first time, I felt nothing. No, that's wrong. I felt a kind of cold, surgical pity. She was not a monster. She was just empty. I turned back to the microphone. I would not talk about her. I would not talk about the slap. The work was the answer. "The Bridge Light Initiative," I said, and my voice was strong. It was clear. "We are currently seeking funding for Phase 2. We plan to secure a dedicated physical headquarters in Granite City and hire our first 2 full-time teacher coordinators." I did not attack. I did not gloat. I did not mention my family, the assault, or the humiliation. I was a professional. My grandfather had shown my work. I was simply finishing the presentation. I was holding myself and my work to a standard. The room was utterly still. The moral scales, which had been so terribly unbalanced, had not just tipped, they had crashed down, shattering one side and lifting the other. Lydia, my father, their world of smoke and mirrors. It was all weightless. The work, the data, Darnell, the note from Sophia's mother. That was the only thing in the room with any gravity at all. I was still on the stage, the echo of my own voice, the one that had just pitched Phase 2 of my life's work, hanging in the air. The room was a pressurized vacuum of judgment. My father looked broken, a man hollowed out. Lydia was a statue of pure, silent rage, her allies having evaporated. I had said what I needed to say. I turned, preparing to step down, to leave the stage and this entire toxic world behind. "One moment, Arabella." My grandfather's voice, amplified, stopped me. I turned back. He was not looking at me. He was looking at Lydia, his face composed, but his eyes were hard. "You have just given us Arabella," he said, his voice filling the room. "A masterclass in accountability. You have shown us your data. You have shown us your work. You have proven your value with transparency." He let the word hang in the air. Transparency. "It is a standard," he continued, his gaze unwavering, "to which I believe everyone in this room should be held, especially those who represent my family and its interests." Lydia, who had been breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling beneath her stained gown, looked up. The rage in her eyes was momentarily eclipsed by a flicker of genuine, animal fear. "Ethan," she began, her voice high and strained, "this is not the time or the place. This is a private family." "It ceased to be a private family matter 3 years ago, Lydia," my grandfather said, his voice dangerously quiet. "But it became a legal matter this evening, when you assaulted my granddaughter. You invited scrutiny. When you called her the liar, you demanded a full accounting." A woman I had not noticed, seated at a table near the back, stood up. She was not dressed for a gala. She wore a severe, dark gray suit, and her hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful. She walked with a crisp, soundless purpose to the microphone my grandfather had just stepped away from. The entire room, every CEO, every surgeon, every philanthropist, watched her. "Good evening," the woman said. Her voice was flat, neutral, and carried the chill of a courtroom. "My name is Catherine Price. I am General Counsel for the Whitmore Dominion Trust." The air in the room did not just thin, it was sucked away. This was not a spat. This was not drama. This was an execution. My father, who had been staring blankly, now looked as if he had been tasered. "Counsel?" he whispered. "No." "Mrs. Mercer, Ms." Price said, addressing Lydia as if she were a hostile witness. "As part of a routine quarterly review requested by Mr. Whitmore, the trust flagged several significant irregularities concerning the discretionary Family Communications and Entertainment Fund, which you have managed for the past 36 months. Lydia's hand went to her throat. She looked at my father, a wild, pleading look in her eyes. He would not meet her gaze. "Over the last 3 years, Ms." Price continued, her voice a relentless, emotionless blade, "you have submitted invoices and been paid for expenditures totaling $478,000. A ripple of shock went through the room. That was not a rounding error. That was a fortune. "These invoices," Price went on, "were for social media management, digital brand consultation, public relations retainers, and event pre-production, all filed under the Family Communications Charter of the Fund." Lydia, seeing a gap, lunged. "That is correct. It is expensive work. My work. Maintaining this family's, our image." "We were curious," Ms. Faris said, unmoved. "So we looked into the recipient of these funds. Every single payment, all $478,000, was paid to one entity, a Delaware-based LLC by the name of Mercer Social Studio. A collective, sharp intake of breath, Lydia's own name. When the trust, Ms. Price said, as is standard practice, requested the deliverables for this expenditure, the reports, the metrics, the campaign data, or even a simple work portfolio, none could be produced." Lydia was on her feet. "This is an outrage. This is complex." "It is, in fact, remarkably simple," Ms. Price countered, her voice dropping a register. "Mercer Social Studio has no employees, it has no offices, it has no other clients. It is a post office box and a bank account. An account controlled exclusively by you. You were not maintaining the family's brand. Mrs. Mercer, you were using the trust as a personal ATM. It was embezzlement, cold, clean, and now public. She was a thief. The woman who had sneered at my consignment dress had been paying for her couture gowns by stealing from the very family she was desperate to impress." My father looked at Lydia. His face was not angry. It was the face of a man who had built his entire world on a foundation of sand, and the tide had just come in. He was ruined. His get-rich-quick dreams were one thing. This was base, common fraud. He was tied to her. This is a lie, Lydia shrieked, her voice cracking. You set me up. She pointed at me. You did this. With him. This whole fake story. This video. You are correct about one thing, Lydia, my grandfather said. He stepped forward again, and his weariness was profound. The video. You claimed Arabella was lying. You claimed she was the performance. But her data was real. Her work was real. He turned to the room. You have now heard testimony about financial transparency. I believe we must also, then, review the other matter, the provocation, the humiliation you claimed. He nodded to the technician at the back. John? Lydia's face, her real face, was now fully visible. The skin was stretched tight over the bones, her eyes wide with a trapped animal's panic. No, you cannot. The North Lake Club is a public venue, my grandfather said, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. As such, it has security cameras, for the protection of its guests, for transparency. The lights dimmed again. The room, this time, was ready. I will ask for 60 seconds of your time. My grandfather's voice resonated in the darkness. I want you to watch, not as guests, but as witnesses. Watch the provocation for yourselves. The giant LED screen lit up. It was not the warm, grainy footage of bridge light. It was cold, high definition, black and white security footage. And it was not one angle, it was three. Angle 1, the wide shot. From the ballroom entrance, it showed me approaching. It showed Lydia's brittle smile, her turning to her friends, the dismissive wave of her hand. Angle 2, a medium shot, from a camera mounted above the bar. It captured the conversation. It captured her sneer. It captured my face, remaining calm, refusing to back down. Angle 3, the close-up, from a camera on the grand staircase. This was the one. This was the one that told the entire story. It showed her, clearly unprovoked. It showed the rage building in her eyes. It showed her, making a conscious decision. It showed her hand, heavy with rings, drawing back. It showed the full, brutal, unadulterated impact. It showed my head snapping back with the force of the blow. It showed me staggering. It showed the red smear on my lip, visible even in black and white. The video played again and again, a silent, damning loop, the slap, the recoil, the shock. "Stop it!" my father screamed, his voice raw. The screen went black. The lights came up, harsh and unforgiving. Lydia Mercer was gone. In her place was a shell. Her face was slack, her makeup a garish mask on a face of pure terror. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. She was, finally, speechless. My grandfather looked at her, and for a moment, I saw not anger, but a profound, deep sadness. Then it was gone, replaced by the iron of his resolve. He nodded, once, to Ms. Price. The lawyer stepped back to the microphone. "Effective immediately," she announced, her voice the sound of a gavel falling. "All access, signing privileges, and representative status granted to Mrs. Lydia Mercer by the Whitmore Dominion Trust are permanently frozen. This will be pending a full forensic audit, and if necessary, a referral to the district attorney." A criminal referral. The words hung in the air. A death sentence. Lydia finally collapsed, not in a faint, but in a heap. She folded into her chair, her hands covering her face, a puppet whose strings had been cut. My grandfather took the microphone from the stand. He held it in his hand, looking out at the stunned faces of his peers. "My apologies for the interruption," he said, his voice firm. "This foundation, this gala, is meant to celebrate value. Tonight, we were simply forced to define it. True elegance," he said, and his eyes found mine, "is not in the diamonds you wear. It is in how you treat the people who have none." He gestured to me. Arabella, thank you for your presentation. You may step down. I looked at my father. He was trapped. He was staring at his wife, the woman who had been his social shield, now revealed as the source of his ultimate ruin. He was caught between the hollow family honor he had preached all my life and the harsh, undeniable truth on the video. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. But for what? I did not know. Forgiveness? Absolution? An escape? I had none to give. I turned. I walked off the stage. I kept my head high, the throb in my cheek a dull, distant drum. I did not look at him. I did not look at her. I walked, and the entire ballroom, silent as a tomb, parted for me. The gala was over. The trial was over. My work was just beginning. I had classrooms to build. I walked off the stage. The thunder of that standing ovation of physical force, the sound was not for me, not for the victim. It was for the work. It was for the numbers. It was for the idea that value, real value, had finally been proven in a room that usually only traded in the imitation. I was focused on the heavy oak doors at the far end of the ballroom. I had no intention of looking at my father, who remained standing by his table, a man so thoroughly hollowed out he was now just a ghost in a tuxedo. I did not look at Lydia, who was a collapsed, silent ruin in her chair. I had said my piece. I had survived. I just wanted to go home. Ms. Hoffman, please, a moment. The voice was not my grandfather's. It was not the lawyer. It was new, crisp, and commanded instant authority. I stopped. I turned. A woman was standing at the head table, the one reserved for the Horizon Regent Foundation. It was Evelyn Hayes, the chairwoman, a formidable, silver-haired woman whose name was on hospitals and university wings. I stood in the aisle, my hand still instinctively touching my cheek, where the pain had settled into a deep, purple throb. Yes? Ms. Hoffman? Evelyn said, and a technician, anticipating, turned her table microphone live. Her voice now filled the room, which had fallen silent again. That was an extraordinary presentation, but it felt incomplete. I felt a flash of cold exhaustion. Ma'am, I am not sure what else there is to say. The how, Evelyn said. She walked a few steps toward me, her gaze analytical. You showed us the why. You showed us the data, the board of the Horizon Foundation. We are practical people. We have just witnessed a significant reevaluation of the evening, and where some see chaos, we see an opportunity. We would like to hear the rest of your pitch. A new murmur? A pitch? Now? Right now? I asked. My voice was a reedy whisper. We have 7 minutes, Evelyn said, glancing at her watch. Our printed program is, shall we say, officially shredded. A small, dry smile. We might as well do something productive with the time. She looked at her fellow board members. They were not smiling. They were watching me. Their faces serious, intrigued. This was not charity. This was not pity. This was an audition. They were no longer looking at the victim. They were looking at the executive. They were testing me. Could I pivot, in this moment, from trauma to operations? I looked at my grandfather. He was standing by his table, watching. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Hold fast. I turned back. I walked, not to the aisle, but back to the stage. The single step up felt like a mountain. I went to the microphone. All right, I said. My voice was shaking, so I gripped the stand. 7 minutes. I looked at the technician at the back of the room. Put a timer on the main screen, I commanded. 7 minutes, counting down. The technician nodded. The massive screen, which had last shown the security footage, went black, and then bright white numbers appeared. 070 Q, 0659, 0658. The entire room, all 150 of the city's most powerful people, held its breath. This, they understood, a high-stakes, time-sensitive pitch. My grandfather's presentation was a surprise, I began, my voice finding its strength. Mine is not. I have been practicing this pitch for 3 years. I just usually deliver it to church basement committees for $5 donations. Not this. A small, appreciative laugh rippled and died. They were with me. You saw the data, now, the model. Bridgelight runs on a principle I call the 1-to-1-to-1. It is the Bridgelight Hour. We take one donated, outdated textbook that would otherwise be in a landfill. We pair it with one trained volunteer mentor, and we guarantee 1 hour of focused, measured literacy training for one student, one book, one mentor, 1 hour. I was in my classroom now. This was my lecture. My stepmother's shell company, I said, and the room tensed at the name. Billed this family almost $500,000 for nothing, no product. Bridgelight, in contrast, served over 12,000 students last year on an annual operating budget of just $40,000. The bank CEO in the front row whistled, a low, impressed sound. How? By recycling value. Other people's waste is our raw material. Their old laptops, their empty conference rooms on a Tuesday night, their last edition textbooks. We are the recycling plant for this city's educational potential. The timer hit 05:30. But our most crucial resource is our teachers. We do not just find volunteers, we train them. We have a network of retired educators, our Bridgelight mentors, who run a mandatory 6-week training program for every new volunteer. We do not just offer babysitting, we offer structured, metric-driven intervention. Our 91% success rate is not an accident. It is the result of a rigorous, repeatable system. I looked at the Horizon board members. They were leaning forward. The $40,000 budget was Phase 1. Phase 2, which I mentioned, is a dedicated headquarters. But it's not just a building. It is a central processing hub for the 1-to-1-to-1 model, a place to inventory the books, refurbish the hardware, and run the mentor training program 24/7. It is the infrastructure that allows us to scale. The timer read 020 quo. You are the Horizon Regent Foundation. You fund hospitals, museums, opera houses, big, beautiful, glorious things. Bridgelight is small. It is granular. It is one book, 1 hour, one child. But that is the point. You cannot build a hospital wing big enough to cure illiteracy. You have to cure it one person at a time. I took a breath. My cheek was afire. I did not care. The problem in this city is not a lack of smart kids. It is a lack of bridges. We are the bridge. My team is ready. The system is proven. We just need the physical plant to anchor it. That is what we are asking for, not a handout. An investment in a proven system. The timer showed 0010, 0009. I am not a charity case, I said, my voice dropping but gaining intensity. I looked at the spot where Lydia sat, now invisible in her own shame. I am the founder and executive director of a high-performing educational nonprofit. We are the best literacy solution in this city. We are the best investment you will make this decade. We just need the fuel. 003, 002, 001, 00. The numbers flashed 0. The screen went black. The silence that followed was not the shocked, horrified silence from before. It was the silence of a boardroom after the final number has been read. It was the sound of calculation. No music swelled, nothing. Then, a single person began to clap. Not my grandfather. It was Evelyn Hayes. She was on her feet. Then the man next to her, the bank CEO, stood. Then, table by table, like a wave. The entire room. They were standing. They were not just clapping. It was thunderous. It was a roar. It was a standing ovation, not of pity, but of profound, unadulterated respect. I stood there, my hand still gripping the microphone stand, and I finally let myself breathe. Evelyn Hayes held up her hand. The applause subsided, but the room remained standing. She did not go to the stage. She spoke from the floor, her voice amplified. Ms. Hoffman, the board of the Horizon Regent Foundation does not typically make funding decisions in the middle of a gala. 30 seconds after a disagreement, a ripple of nervous laughter. But, she continued, We also do not typically witness, well, this, you showed us a problem, and then you showed us the solution, and your solution is, as you said, the best we have seen. She looked at her board members, who nodded in unison. The Horizon Board is prepared to bypass our next 2 grant cycles. We are approving, pending Ms. Price's verification of your nonprofit status, which I am sure will be immaculate, an 18-month trial package. My heart hammered against my ribs. We will fund, in full, the acquisition and build-out of your new headquarters. We will fund the salaries for your 2 coordinators, and a third for you, as executive director. I felt my knees buckle. I gripped the stand to stay upright. The total value of this initial investment package, Evelyn Hayes said, her voice ringing with satisfaction, will be $5 million. $5 million. The room exploded. The applause was deafening. A physical blow. I was dizzy. 5 million. It was a number so large it was meaningless. It was everything. There is one condition, Evelyn shouted over the noise. The room went quiet again, instantly. My colleagues and I were particularly struck, she said, and a hard, steely edge entered her voice. By the disdain shown tonight for a specific part of our community, the part of our community where this work is most needed, the place my own parents started. Therefore, the sole condition of this grant is that the first Bridgelight National Headquarters must be located, permanently, within the city limits of Granite City. The place Lydia called poor, the place she called a charity case, the place she had been so ashamed of. It was now the anchor for a $5 million investment. The poetic justice was so thick, so perfect, it was almost cruel. I nodded, unable to speak. We have one more piece of business, Evelyn said. Mr. Whitmore? My grandfather, who had been watching me, his expression unreadable, stood. He walked not to the stage, but to Evelyn Hayes. He took the handheld microphone she offered. The Foundation's gift is for infrastructure, he said, his voice deep and steady. It is for the how, but I have always been interested in the who. Arabella mentioned her network of teacher mentors, the ones who do the training, the ones who guarantee the 91% success rate. He looked at me. The Whitmore Dominion Trust, separate from this, he gestured to the board, will be making its own investment. We will establish a permanent endowment, effective immediately, to fund the Bridgelight Teacher Training Program. We will pay for every mentor stipend, every training book, every background check, that part of your operation. It is now funded, in perpetuity. He had not just given me fuel, he had given me an engine that would never stop. And we will be naming it, he concluded, his voice thickening for just a fraction of a second. The Eleanor Whitmore Fund, after my daughter, Arabella's mother. I lost it, the tears I had not shed for the slap, for the humiliation, for the anger. They came now, a hot, silent, unstoppable flood, not for the money, for the name. He had given me my mother back. The rest of the night was a blur. The media, who had been there for the society photos, swarmed me. They smelled blood and triumph. Ms. Hoffman, how does it feel? What will you say to your stepmother? Is it true you're getting $5 million? I put my hand up. I wiped my face. I looked at the camera. My name is Arabella Hoffman, I said, my voice still thick. I am a lecturer at Redwood Vale Community College, and I am the director of the Bridgelight Initiative. Tonight, the Horizon Foundation and the Whitmore Trust gave thousands of students in this city a future. I have to go call my team. We have work to do. I turned and walked away from them. I would not give them the drama. I would not give them the soundbite about Lydia. The story was not the slap. The story was the work. As I was leaving, I saw 2 final tableaus. In the grand foyer, Lydia was leaving, or trying to. She was alone, her head down, her makeup a ruin. Her friends, the women she had held court with, were clustered by the coat check, their backs turned to her, laughing about something else, actively avoiding her gaze. She was a ghost, a social death. And my father, he saw me. He saw a reporter's camera swing toward me. He made a desperate move. He rushed toward me, his arms outstretched, a pained, loving, reconciled look on his face. Arabella, my daughter. He was trying for the photo, the family reconciliation photo, the spin. He never made it. A black-suited organizer from the North Lake Club stepped directly in his path. "Sir," the man said, his voice flat, "we have asked you to remain by your wife. We are arranging your transport." "That is my daughter," my father blustered. "Sir," the organizer said, and his hand was on my father's arm. "The club has a strict code of conduct. After the incident, we are asking you to leave quietly. Do not engage the other guests." He was being escorted out, bounced, not for the fraud, but for the indecency, for being part of the ugly scene. The optics he lived by had finally, completely consumed him. I did not watch him go. I found a quiet alcove by the door. I pulled out my phone. The battery was at 4%. I had dozens of missed calls from Maria, my co-founder, who must have been watching a feed or getting texts. I opened our secure chat. I typed one sentence. "Phase 2 is a go. Activate the Granite City expansion plan. We are fully funded." I hit send, and then, for the first time all night, I let my shoulders slump. I leaned against the cold marble wall, my cheek throbbing, my dress stained with champagne, my heart full. The battle was over. The real work was about to begin. The gala did not just end. It imploded. The fallout was not a slow burn. It was a series of rapid, precise detonations. I did not have to read the gossip columns. The consequences were institutional, swift, and delivered with the cold neutrality of organizations protecting their own brands. Before I had even woken up, before the adrenaline had fully metabolized, the first domino had fallen, the North Lake Club, whose sacred halls had been desecrated by an act of public violence, issued a private statement to its members. By noon, it was public. Lydia Mercer's membership was not just suspended, it was permanently revoked, effective immediately. The club, they made clear, was a place for civilized discourse, not a stage for brawling. They had a code of conduct. Lydia had, in the most spectacular way possible, violated it. The second domino was the Mercer Social Studio. Ms. Price's public evisceration was only the prelude. The Whitmore Dominion Trust did not just freeze the fund. It triggered an independent forensic audit. Within 48 hours, the auditors had uncovered the full pathetic scope of the fraud. It was not just embezzlement from the trust, it was tax fraud. Mercer Social Studio, a company that did nothing, had not filed taxes in 2 years. It was a hollow shell, filled only with fake invoices, a small mountain of unpaid payroll taxes for a ghost employee, and a long trail of debt. The district attorney's office, alerted by the auditors, opened an official investigation. The third domino was my father. He was not a member of the North Lake Club. He was merely a guest. But he was a member of the Granite City Trade Council, a position he loved, a seat that gave him the veneer of legitimacy he so desperately craved. He had not struck me. He had not stolen money. He had done something, in their eyes, almost as bad. He had failed to uphold the standards of professional conduct. He had been a silent, complicit party to a public, violent act. He had failed to de-escalate. He had, in the words of the council's internal memo, contributed to a spectacle that brought disrepute upon the council. He was asked to resign his seat. He did. Lydia was a social pariah. My father was a professional one, and I was at my kitchen table at 6 a.m. the next morning with Maria, my co-founder, and our 2 best volunteers, surrounded by cold coffee and a stack of legal pads. The $5 million was not money in my bank account. It was a promise. The real work was just beginning. My phone rang at 7 a.m. It was an unknown number, but the caller ID said Whitmore Trust. "Arabella Hoffman," I answered, my voice still thick with sleep and coffee. "He wants to see you," A polite, neutral voice said, "Your grandfather, dinner, tonight, his home, a car will be at your apartment at 6:30. It was not a question. That evening, I was driven not to the grand family estate Lydia had always coveted, but to a simple, elegant penthouse downtown. My grandfather opened the door himself. He was not in a tuxedo. He was in a simple cashmere sweater and slacks. There was no one else there. Just a small table, set for two, by a window overlooking the city. He did not mention the gala. He did not mention my father. He did not mention Lydia. He did not say he was proud, or sorry, or anything emotional. He was all business. "You have a $5 million grant from Horizon and an endowment from my trust," he said, as we sat down to a simple meal of salmon and asparagus. "You are now, whether you plan to be or not, a CEO. The systems you built for a church basement are not the systems you need to manage a multi-million-dollar budget." "I am aware of that," I said, my voice steady. "Good," he said. "The money is real. The accountability must be, too. Horizon's board is tough. My board is tougher. You will be required to submit quarterly transparency reports, every dollar in, every dollar out, every metric, every outcome, every failure. Do you understand?" "I built Bridgelight on metrics. Sir, I welcome it." He nodded, satisfied. "I am not your sir. I am your grandfather. But in this," he gestured to the room, "I am your investor." He took a bite of salmon. "Now, the endowment will cover the teachers. The Horizon grant will cover the building and the first set of salaries. But what is missing? What are the tactical, immediate need items the grant application did not cover?" I had been waiting for this. I had not slept. I had been making a list. I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "I need 10 things," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "Go." 1. A dedicated, secure server. We are moving from spreadsheets to a real database to track our students. I need to protect their privacy. 2. A bookmobile, a van, not for classes, but for intake, to go to the neighborhoods, to sign people up, to prove we can meet them where they are. 3. A full, non-revocable liability insurance policy for every single volunteer. If they are working for us, they are protected by us. 4. 50 new, high-quality, adjustable height bookshelves, not particle board, steel. 5. A subscription to the top 3 literacy software platforms. We will use them as a baseline for our own superior methods. 6. A lawyer, a nonprofit specialist, to review every line of the grant, every lease, every hiring contract. 7. A professional-grade printer. 8. 20 new laptops for the mentor coordinators we are about to hire, not refurbished. 9. A new set of locks for my apartment. I paused. He looked up, his gaze sharp. "And?" 10, I said, meeting his eyes. A promise that not $1 of this," I tapped the table, "ever comes with a condition that changes the mission. The mission is non-negotiable." He was silent for a long time. He looked down at my list, then he looked at me. "The lawyer is already handled," he said. "Ms. Price's firm will be your pro bono counsel until you hire your own. As for the other 8 items, send the purchase orders to my personal assistant tomorrow morning. They will be funded, in full, from my personal account. They are not part of the trust's endowment. They are a gift." He then looked at my final point. "And 10, he said, his voice quiet. "The mission is yours. Arabella, you built it. I am just buying a few bricks. The mission is never for sale. That," he added, with a flicker of something new, "is a lesson your father never learned." The next morning, I sent 2 emails. The first was to my grandfather's assistant, with purchase orders. The second was to my tiny core team at Bridgelight. It was an internal memo. It detailed the new budget, it detailed the new headquarters, and it included one ironclad rule. "For the first operating year," I wrote, "under this new Horizon grant, there will be no personal bonuses. Not for me, not for anyone. Every cent of this windfall goes to the mission. We will not change. We will only grow. We will prove we are worthy of this, not by what we spend on ourselves, but by what we build for others. We are still the scrappy basement nonprofit. We just have a bigger basement. The media, of course, was a storm. My phone, my email, my parents' old address, they were all flooded. Tabloid shows, morning talk shows, sensationalist tell-alls. They all wanted the crying victim. They all wanted the slap heard round the city. They all wanted the family drama. I refused every single one. Instead, I chose 3. The local Granite City public radio station, a small, independent community newspaper, and the newsletter for the Redwood Vale Community College. I did not talk about Lydia. I did not talk about my father. When they asked about the gala, I said one thing, and one thing only. The Horizon Regent Foundation and the Whitmore Trust saw the value in our work, and we are eternally grateful for their support. Then, I spent 20 minutes on each program talking about Darnell. I talked about Sophia. I talked about the 91% improvement metric. I talked about the 1-to-1-to-1 model. I turned every spotlight they aimed at my face and wrestled it back onto the work. On Friday, a week after the gala, I received a letter. It was hand-delivered, on Lydia's thick, cream-colored personal stationery. It was not a letter of apology. It was a summons. Arabella, it read, I believe it is time we sit down as a family and discuss these recent misunderstandings. We need to present a united front. Be at the house on Sunday for dinner. She was not apologizing. She was not even acknowledging. She was, even in the smoking ruins of her life, still trying to manage the optics. She still thought this was about her. I did not go to the house. I did not call. I took one of her own expensive note cards from my father's study. I had a few left over from years ago. I wrote 4 sentences. Lydia, there is no united front. There is only the truth. A family meeting is not possible until a public apology for the assault and a private admission of the fraud has been made. My framework for any future contact is as follows: respect, accountability, and absolutely no verbal or physical violence. Until then, there is nothing to discuss. Arabella. I sent it back to her via a certified courier. I heard from my grandfather that she received it. I did not hear from my father at all. His silence was total. He, a man who had lived his entire life in a performance of boasts and projections, had finally, at long last, run out of lines. He had nothing left to say, because he had nothing left to show. I did not have time to think about him. I was too busy. That afternoon, I posted our first official job opening. It was not for a CFO. It was not for a COO. It was for a lead mentor coordinator, Granite City. And I put a line in the description that I had been waiting 3 years to write. We are seeking applicants from the communities we serve. Preference will be given to those with a background in adult education, community organizing, and a lived experience in the working-class neighborhoods of this city. My phone rang all day. This time, it was not the media. It was people applying for the job. The work had begun. 2 weeks after the gala, the summons came. It was not a scented card from Lydia, nor an anxious phone call from my father. It was an email from Ms. Price, the General Counsel for the Whitmore Dominion Trust. The subject line was simple: Family Reconciliation Meeting. The body was Spartan. I was requested to attend a meeting at the downtown offices of the Trust at 9 a.m. on Monday. The stated purpose was to codify new terms of family engagement and review all outstanding matters. It was a command performance, but this time, I was not the performer. I was the key stakeholder. I arrived at 9 a.m. sharp. The Trust offices were not a warm, wood-paneled study. They were a high-floor expanse of glass, steel, and white marble. The conference room was vast, dominated by a 30-foot black granite table that felt as cold as a tombstone. There was no art on the walls. There were no photographs. There was no coffee, no water, no alcohol. Just a sterile, white light environment designed for one thing: the complete absence of comfort. My grandfather, Ethan, was already there, at the head of the table. Ms. Price was at his right hand, a thick, leather-bound portfolio in front of her. My father was already seated. He was on the far side of the table, alone. He looked smaller. The sharp, bespoke suits he favored had been replaced by a simple, ill-fitting blazer. He looked like a man who had not slept in 2 weeks. He looked deflated. He did not meet my eyes. Then, at 9:01, the door opened, and Lydia entered. She was not escorted by my father. She was escorted by a man in a dark suit who I recognized as one of the trust's lawyers. If my father looked deflated, Lydia looked erased. She was a pencil sketch of her former self. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, severe bun. She wore no makeup, not as a statement of humility, but as if she had forgotten how. The vibrant, aggressive colors she wore were gone, replaced by a drab beige dress that hung on her. She looked, finally, like the empty, hollow fraud she was. She, too, did not look at me. She sat next to my father, leaving a visible, calculated foot of space between their chairs. "Thank you all for coming," Ms. Price began, her voice the neutral, chilling sound of the law. "We are here today, at the direction of Mr. Whitmore, to resolve the events of 2 weeks ago and to establish a new, legally binding protocol for all future family interactions. There will be no cameras. There will be no recording devices, other than our own official stenographer." She gestured to a silent woman in the corner. "Everything said here today is on the record." My father flinched. Lydia's hands, which were clasped on the table, began to tremble. "We will begin," Ms. Price continued. With the apology, she slid a single sheet of paper across the polished granite to Lydia. "Mrs. Mercer, you will read this aloud." Lydia stared at the paper as if it were a snake. She looked at my grandfather. "Ethan, please," she whispered. Her voice was a dry, reedy thing. This is not necessary. It was a mistake." "It was." My grandfather's voice cut in, cold and final. "A series of crimes. One was battery, the other was felony fraud. The mistake was in believing you would not be held accountable. Read the statement. Lydia, or Ms. Price will begin reading the draft of the criminal complaint we have prepared for the district attorney." Lydia's face, pale as it was, turned to chalk. The threat was not subtle. It was a guillotine, held in place by a single thread. Her trembling hand reached for the paper. She held it up. She had to use both hands to keep it from shaking. She started. She stopped, swallowed. Lydia Mercer, do hereby offer my public and unconditional apology to Arabella Hoffman." She stumbled over my name. "I apologize," she continued, her voice a monotone of forced compliance, "for the act of physical violence, the assault, I committed against her at the Northlake Club. My actions were indefensible, unprovoked, and a violation of her person." She paused, taking a shuddering breath. "Furthermore, I apologize for my financial misconduct. I admit, publicly, to the systematic misappropriation of $478,000 from the Whitmore Dominion Trust through the shell entity Mercer Social Studio." "Read the last line," Ms. Price commanded, her voice sharp. Lydia's eyes squeezed shut for a moment. She was weeping, not tears of remorse, tears of pure, unadulterated humiliation. "My actions," she choked out, "were a betrayal of my family and a violation of the law. I have no excuse." She finished, she dropped the paper, she put her face in her hands. The apology, stripped of all emotion, was a brutal, legal confession. "Very good," Ms. Price said. "Now, the terms." She slid a thick document toward Lydia, and a second, thinner one toward my father. "Lydia," Ms. Price said, "this is your new reality. You will sign this. It is a full restitution agreement. It stipulates that you will be liquidating all personal assets, your jewelry, your car, your art, to begin repayment of the $478,000, the house, your marital home, will be placed on the market. My father's head snapped up. What? No, that is my house. It is. Robert, my grandfather's voice was like gravel. A house purchased with a down payment from the trust, a trust your wife was actively stealing from. You are lucky we are not classifying you as an accomplice. You will sell the house, you will downsize, and you will be silent. My father's mouth closed. He shrank, literally shrank, back into his chair. This document, Ms. Price continued, tapping the stack in front of Lydia, also stipulates a new morality clause. Any future act of verbal aggression, financial irregularity, or public misrepresentation, any repeat of your behavior, will result in your immediate and permanent removal from any and all access to Whitmore family assets. You will be, in legal and financial terms, completely and permanently disowned. There will be no second chance. Do you understand? Lydia, her face still in her hands, just nodded, a single, jerky motion. She did not read the document. She reached for a pen and signed it. Robert, Ms. Price said, turning to my father. He looked terrified. Yours is simpler. It is a conduct agreement. You will sign it. It states that you, too, are bound by a code of conduct. Any violation of that code, any attempt to pressure Arabella, any complicity in Lydia's behavior, any public outburst, will result in your immediate, permanent exclusion from any and all foundation events. You will not be invited. You will not be admitted. You will be, for all intents and purposes, invisible to this family's public life. My father, the man who lived for the public event, for the photo op, for the association. This was a death sentence. He signed the paper without a word. Good, Ms. Price collected the documents. That concludes the legal portion. We will now move to the family portion. My grandfather spoke. Arabella, this family, my family, has done you a great disservice. I am now in the business of rectifying that. The trust board has approved a new position. We would like you to be our family ambassador for education. It will come with a stipend, a seat at foundation dinners. It was a golden cage. It was Lydia's old job, just with a new title. It was PR. No, I said. The room went silent. My father and Lydia both looked up, shocked. I thank you, grandfather, I said, my voice firm. But I am not an ambassador. I am not a family anything. I am an executive. I am a teacher. I will not be a public relations figure. Ethan looked at me, a slow, long look. He was testing me, and then, for the first time, he smiled, a real, small, appreciative smile. No, he said, you are not, so what will you be? Bridgelight, I said, is now a major partner of the trust. I will accept a formal advisory role. I will be an independent education advisor to the board. I will not take a stipend. I will, however, be given full access to your educational grant-making data, and I will have the right to veto any partnership that I deem performative. Done, Ethan said, without hesitation. Your terms are accepted. He continued, there is one more thing. I am establishing a new scholarship, in my daughter's name, the Eleanor Whitmore Scholarship, for student teachers at Granite City University who are struggling to finish their degrees. This was not PR. This was real. That is wonderful, I said, my voice thick. Thank you. I am proposing a $50,000 initial fund, he said. A condition, I said, finding my feet again. I accept, but I want a condition. The scholarship must prioritize applicants who sign a 3-year commitment to teach in the underserved districts, in Northbridge, in Granite City, where the poor path is. The money must be tied to the work, not just the name. A brilliant condition, Ethan said. It is added. Lydia, who had been silent, let out a small, broken sob. Ms. Price slid a document to her. It was a single-page printout. It was a transcript of the security camera video. It was just the audio. I will not lie for you, her, you will not embarrass me, and then, in cold capital letters, sound of physical impact. This is the official record, Ms. Price said to her. It is now part of the family archives. You have no defense. You have no leverage. This is your reality. My father, seeing this, made one last, desperate grasp for his old life. Ethan, he pleaded, his voice thin. This is all so harsh. Can we not erase this? Move on? Forgive and forget? Put the past behind us? No. Ethan's voice was like a door slamming shut. We will not. We do not erase the past, Robert. We remember it. We document it. We archive it. We learn from it. And we do so. He looked at me. So that we are never, ever forced to repeat it. This family is done with erasing. This family is now in the business of remembering. You, he pointed to the stenographer, will have a copy of this transcript, as will I, as will Arabella. It is the new family rulebook. I looked at my father. He was, finally, finished. He had nothing. Ms. Price slid one final document to me. It was not a contract. It was a simple, one-page document titled Rules of Engagement. This is yours, Ms. Hoffman, she said. This is a non-legal, but binding, protocol for your father and Mrs. Mercer. It outlines your terms. You requested them. Respect, accountability, transparency, no exploitation of your image. Sign it, and it will be attached to their legal agreements. They will be bound by your rules. I signed it, a complete reversal. I was now the one setting the terms for them. The meeting was over. We left. I walked out of that sterile room, not feeling triumphant, but feeling braced. The next week, it started. A new email, an anonymous address, sent to the Horizon Foundation Board, sent to the local newspaper. It was a smear. Bridgelight Initiative fudging numbers? Sources say Hoffman's success is a lie. It was a clumsy attempt, pathetic. My phone rang. It was Evelyn Hayes from Horizon. Arabella, she said, her voice amused. I am just calling to let you know we received an interesting email. I saw it, I said. I was in the new Bridgelight office, a massive, dusty warehouse in Granite City. This used to be a problem, I told her, as I walked to my new desk. An allegation, even an anonymous one, would have destroyed us. It would have been my word against theirs. And now? She asked. And now, I said, it is not a problem. It is a data point. I opened my laptop. I went to the public dashboard. I clicked a button. I updated the dashboard with the latest weekly data, fresh from that Saturday's classes. I attached the link. I am sending an email back to the anonymous sender. I told Evelyn, and I am copying you. The email says, thank you for your interest in our data. You seem to be working from an outdated report. Here is the link to our live, public-facing dashboard, which is updated daily. We welcome your scrutiny. There was a pause, and then Evelyn Hayes laughed, a deep, rich laugh. You are not worried, Arabella? No, I said, as I looked at the 10 volunteers who were painting the walls of our new center. I am not worried. I am not in the business of hiding, but I am in the business of internal audits. This was a good reminder. I hung up. I called Maria. Maria, I said, I want you to double-check every entry from the last quarter, and then I want you to hire an independent, external auditor, not from the trust, our own. I want us to be so clean, so transparent, that we are bulletproof. I was not sleeping. I was not celebrating. The war was over, but the peace was going to be a different kind of fight. I was no longer a victim. I was a target, and I intended to be a very, very difficult one. 6 months later, the doors opened. The Bridgelight Granite City Center was not a monument of glass and steel. It was an old red brick warehouse, a former textile mill, and we had kept the bones of it. The floors were polished, original wood, the beams were exposed, the walls were lined not with art, but with thousands upon thousands of books, a floor-to-ceiling library that formed the building's heart. The grand opening was not a gala. There were no champagne flutes. There was coffee in cardboard cups and donuts from a local Granite City bakery. The auditorium was not filled with tuxedos. It was a sea of parkas, work uniforms, and the faces of the community. Every seat was taken. The people from Northbridge, the parents, the volunteers, my old colleagues from Redwood Vale. They were all there. Evelyn Hayes and the Horizon Board were in the front row. My grandfather was beside them. He was the one who stood up to speak first. The room fell into a respectful hush. He walked to the simple wooden podium. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice warm, amplified just slightly. 6 months ago, at a different sort of event, I asked a room to be silent. I asked for silence to hear a truth that was being ignored. The room was still, people remembering the story the newspapers had finally, correctly, reported. "Today," he continued, "I am asking for silence again, not to hear a grievance, but to offer a tribute. I want to ask for 1 minute of silence, not for the donors, not for the boards, but for every single teacher, mentor, and volunteer in this room and in this city, for the people who do the quiet, essential work of building bridges, one word at a time, for the people like my daughter, Eleanor, and for the people who follow in her footsteps." He bowed his head. The entire room, 500 people, fell into a profound, shared quiet. It was not the tense, horrified silence of the gala. It was a silence of respect. It was a silence of peace. After a minute, he looked up. "Thank you." He stepped away from the podium. The large screen above the stage, the same kind of screen that had shown my humiliation and then my data, lit up, but this time, it was not grainy security footage. It was not a spreadsheet. It was Darnell, the mechanic. He was not in a classroom. He was in his own garage, on a Sunday, reading a technical manual. He looked up at the camera. "I got my ASE certification last month," he said, tapping the book. "I couldn't read manuals like this before. Now I'm the shop foreman. It all started when I read The House on the Hill. Thank you." His face faded, replaced by Sophia, the third grader's mother. "Sophia is on the honor roll," she said, weeping, but this time with joy. She reads to her little brother, There are no words for what you gave us." One after another, a dozen faces, a dozen stories. The screen did not show a single scandal. It did not show my face. It did not show a single check being written. It just showed the faces of people who had found their words, and in doing so, had found their power. The final image was a simple handwritten note, scanned and magnified. "I can read," it said, in large, shaky letters. The lights came up. The room was a blur of tears. My grandfather nodded to me. It was my turn. I walked to the podium. I looked out at the faces, my team, my students, my city. "My name is Arabella Hoffman," I said, "and I am a teacher. 6 months ago, I was just a teacher, and today—" I looked around at the vast, beautiful, book-filled space. "I am still a teacher. My classroom just got a lot bigger." I kept it short. I spoke about the mission. I spoke about the one-to-one-to-one model. I did not, for 1 second, speak about the past. I spoke about the future. I spoke about the work. "Thank you," I finished, "for believing in the work. The real work starts now." The room rose to its feet, the applause a warm, rolling wave of shared purpose. As they clapped, I saw her. I had not known she would be here. She was not invited. She must have come in the back. She was in the very last row, standing against the wall, Lydia. She was not the skeletal, erased woman from the legal office. She looked normal. She wore a simple dark dress. Her hair was cut short. She looked like a different person. She looked like someone who had been through a fire and had, against all odds, survived. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the screen, where the image of the "I can read" note still lingered. As the applause began to die, she raised her hand, not for a question, just a small gesture, and then, in the returning quiet, she stood up straight. The people near her, neighbors from the community, turned, looking at her. They knew who she was. The whispers began. "That's her." My father, who was sitting 2 rows in front of her, turned. His face was a mask of panic. He, too, looked different. He worked, I knew, in a small accounting firm now, a job my grandfather had quietly arranged. He was just a man. Lydia did not look at him. She looked at me, across the entire auditorium, and she said, her voice clear, carrying in the silence, with no microphone, but with absolute, painful clarity, "I'm sorry." It was 2 words. She did not say what for. The assault, the fraud, the years of cruelty, it did not matter. The 2 words held all of it. She said it, and then she sat back down and bowed her head. A new, strange silence fell. And then, my father did something. He began to clap, a slow, lonely, awkward sound. He was clapping for her. He was clapping for the apology. For a second, it was just him, his solitary, pathetic applause. And then, something remarkable happened. Evelyn Hayes, in the front row, turned, saw what was happening, and she began to clap, too. And then the room, not for Lydia, not for my father, but for the act itself, for the possibility of an apology, for the brutal, difficult honesty of it. The room joined in, a soft, respectful, final applause, the end of the war. As if on cue, Evelyn Hayes stood up, as if to cut the tension. "An amazing day," she boomed, "and we, at the Horizon Foundation, have one final announcement." She took the stage. What we have seen here, in Granite City, is not just a success, it is a model, a scalable, repeatable, proven model, and we believe this model needs to move. She smiled at me. The board has just approved, based on the 6-month metrics from this pilot center, a new $20 million expansion grant. We are going to be working with Arabella and her team to open Bridge Light centers in the next 3 neighboring states. The room did not applaud. It roared. The sound was a physical thing, a testament to the fact that the work, the real, quiet, hard work, had won, completely. Later, as the crowd thinned and people were touring the new classrooms, my grandfather found me by the window. "The first time I asked for silence," he said, his voice quiet, "it was to listen to your pain. I had to force them to hear it." He looked out at the busy, happy, loud room. "Today," he said, "I asked for silence, just to listen to the hope. You built this, Arabella, all of it." A reporter, a young woman from the local paper, found me. "Ms. Hoffman," she said, "it's an incredible story, but people are still wondering, that night, at the gala. The slap, how much of this," she gestured, "was about justice for that?" I looked at her. I thought of Lydia's apology. I thought of my father's lonely applause. "You are confusing the plot with the story," I said. "The slap was just the plot. It was the vulgar, loud, unimportant thing that happened. It is not the center of this story, the center of the story." I pointed to a new classroom, where a volunteer was showing a child how to use a computer. "Is in there. The center is the open book. The center is the moment a person learns they have a voice. That's the only story I am interested in telling." She nodded. She finally understood. The next Monday morning, I did not go to the new $20 million center. I went to Redwood Vale. I had one class, my introductory writing course, that I had refused to give up. I sat at my old, scarred wooden desk, the same one I had sat at when I was just the charity case. The coffee was stale. The fluorescent light hummed. I was grading papers. A sentence a student had written was clunky. I picked up my red pen. I circled it. I wrote a note in the margin. This is a strong idea, but let's try to rephrase it. What if you said it like this? I was just a teacher. I opened my email. I had hundreds of messages about the expansion, the funding, the logistics, but one email, at the very bottom, was from a name I did not recognize. The subject was, guess what, Ms. H. I opened it. Dear Ms. Hoffman, you do not know me. I was in your first, original bridge light class in the church basement 3 years ago. I was the one who kept messing up the intake forms. I am writing to tell you. I just got my acceptance letter. I got a full scholarship to the community college, to Redwood Vale. I start in the fall. I got it. Because I knew how to write the essay. Because of those bridge light hours. Thank you. I closed my eyes. The 5 million. The 20 million. The apology. None of it mattered as much as this. That evening, I was the last one to leave the community college. I packed my bag, turned off the lights in my small, shared office. The room went dark. I walked to the window, across the city, through the cold night air. I could see it. The old brick warehouse, my new center, every single one of its windows was blazing with light. It was our late-night study session. It was full. It was alive. Justice is not always loud. Sometimes, it is not about tearing something down. Sometimes, it is about building something, brick by painful, meticulous brick, until it is so big and so bright that it simply, completely and permanently eclipses the darkness. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I am so curious to know where you are all listening from. Please, drop a comment below. Let's connect and share our thoughts. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to Lila Revenge Stories, liking this video, and hitting that hype button to help it reach more people who need to hear it.